All right, so let's talk about the one thing that will solve most of your problems with women, because most guys aren't actually doing this the right way, or they aren't putting in the effort at all. And that is volume. Volume is extremely important for multiple reasons. I'm gonna get into those reasons. But one thing I wanna emphasize with this off the bat, and this is important as a man in the dating process, is to get used to thinking in terms of metrics instead of feelings and emotions. Think in terms of numbers instead of your feelings. And this is where volume starts to come into play. The first reason that volume is extremely important is more of an obvious reason. It's the thing that we all realize that, if you sit in your bedroom all day and don't talk to any girls, you're not gonna get anywhere, right? That's the obvious reason. So running higher volume and getting in front of more women on a regular basis is very important just for that alone, just getting exposure. Most guys have an exposure problem. Most guys are not getting adequate exposure on a regular basis, and that is a huge problem. But there's more to the puzzle than just that. Now, one of the big issues with running low volume, or not running enough volume in other words, is that you will start to focus on the things that don't matter because you don't have a large enough sample size in front of you. Right off the bat, you're working with data that is flawed because you don't have enough of it to actually draw conclusions from. You don't have enough data to actually make solid conclusions and understand where your strengths and weaknesses actually lie. When you're not gathering enough data or correct data, you're gonna start focusing on the areas that aren't actually problematic, or you'll focus on little details that don't actually matter. So let's use something like dating apps as an example. If you only message a couple girls per month on dating apps and you don't get any dates from it, you're going to come to the conclusion that, well, dating apps just don't work, or your game isn't tight enough or something. And there may be some elements of truth to that. There are gonna be things that you need to improve in the process, but that's because your volume is low. However, the bigger problem there is that you don't actually have enough information to conclude that dating apps don't work at all, or that you're just hopeless and it's never gonna work for you. Now let's use approaching girls as an example. So let's say you approach 2 to 3 girls a month, which is just too low volume. Most guys aren't even doing that though. Most guys aren't even approaching 2 or 3 girls. Most guys aren't approaching 1 girl per month. Now let's say you approach 3 girls and none of them pan out. What a lot of guys will then do in that scenario is say, approaching doesn't work, or I'm just not attractive enough, or this stuff's just too hard, I'm not gonna do it anymore. Or some guys will go even further than that and just say they're completely hopeless. And the reason I bring this up is this video was partially inspired by a discussion I was a part of with another guy, where he was just saying he's tried it all, he hasn't had any success with women, and he feels like he's just screwed. Now, anytime someone makes broad generalizations like that, to where they're just completely hopeless, or online methods don't work, or in-person methods don't work, the first thing that comes to mind for me, the first thing I'm highly skeptical of, is how much exposure they're actually getting and how much work they're actually putting into the process. Because most guys greatly exaggerate what they're actually doing. And this guy in this discussion was no different. When I asked him, okay, how many girls have you talked to this year? Because he said that online dating apps don't work, so he prefers in person, right? But he was also saying that he's just screwed overall. So I said, okay, tell me how many girls you've approached this year. Just give me a rough number. And he goes, I've approached 8 or 9. And then he went on this long tirade basically on why he's screwed. And I said, everything that you said after the 8 or 9, I just blocked out, because that is the source of your problem, or that's a big part of it at least. There can be other issues too, like your look, of course, your communication and everything. Communication is gonna be rusty in general if you're only talking to 8 or 9 girls per year. This is not enough. It's not enough volume. So there's tons of cases like this where guys come to big conclusions off little data. They come to big conclusions off a tiny sample size. So if you're wondering how much volume is actually needed in that case, I can tell you it's a lot more than 8 or 9. So if you actually want to improve at these things, you got to put in real effort and get real volume in. Because if you don't, you're going to be making conclusions that are completely inaccurate. And going back to my point about focusing on things that don't actually matter, you'll start to focus on a bunch of little things that aren't even really relevant. So for instance, you might approach a girl, get rejected, she's not interested at all. Let's say it's a pretty harsh rejection. She just ignores you like you don't even exist. Then you approach another girl and with a similar type of approach, and she's far more receptive. And then after her, you approach another girl with the same approach, and the girl's kind of in the middle. And then the fourth one, you get harshly rejected again. There's a wide variety of reactions that you could receive even with the exact same approach. So if you don't get that volume in, what's gonna happen is, let's say you approach that first girl and you stop, you'll get rejected. You go, oh man, I need a better opener. Or maybe it's something with my body language. I need to go watch more YouTube videos. But the problem is actually you just don't have enough volume. If you kept going and you smoothed out the variance, you would see that your approach was actually fine. You just didn't approach enough to actually get a good sample size. And that's another point. With any dating method, in person, online, doesn't matter what it is, you have to smooth out the variance so you can understand where your actual strengths and weaknesses are, and if something is just a fluke or not. Otherwise, you're not gonna know. So I've talked to multiple guys and helped them get better results with online dating, and then they might hit a little bit of a dip and they start doubting themselves. They start thinking, oh no, what's going wrong? Like, is something wrong with how I'm talking to these girls? Do they not find me attractive? And it's like, hold on, man, slow down. There's ebbs and flows to things. Nothing is 100% consistent all the time. No one has a 100% home run rate. No one's shooting 100% from 3. That's not a real thing. Just keep going, iron out the variance, keep talking to girls, keep waiting it out, keep making more approaches in person if you're doing more in-person methods. You have to keep going in order to smooth out the variance, because there's going to be rejections, there's going to be girls who fall off for some unknown reason. You're just never going to be 100%. There's nobody on earth who's 100% with this stuff. So the only way to smooth out that variance is just to get a larger sample size and continue to run volume until you smooth it out in order to get an accurate view of where you're at. Volume will also allow you to realize that you can do everything right and still fail, quote unquote. Again, if you watch some of my previous videos, I don't even like to think of any of this stuff with women as failing per se. It's more of just like a learning experience, because when a woman's not interested in you and she rejects you or leaves your life for whatever reason, she's actually doing you a favor. It's not some like cliche platitude either to try to feel better about the situation. It's just the truth. That person is not a good fit, and it's actually a good thing that she eliminated herself. So another thing you'll learn through volume is that a lot of the like overly gamey stuff and a lot of the stuff you learn online doesn't actually matter. It's actually more reliant on the volume aspect and actually talking to enough women and finding women who are most like your type and the demographic of women that you actually want to interact with. So going back to our approach example, just because the first girl out of the 5 you talked to rejected you doesn't mean that you needed to learn better push-pull tactics for the first one, or some sick opener, or some other complicated method in order to pull her. She may have just not been interested in you at all, and that same exact approach would work fine with the next 2 girls. But again, you won't know that unless you go through multiple approaches. And the example sample size I'm using here of 5 is obviously very small. In a real life scenario, it might be 50 girls, and you might get rejected by the first 10 to 15. It just depends where your skill level is at and how comfortable you are with approaching at that point. But you know, it's another note that you're not going to be skillful at it or be comfortable doing it unless you're actually doing a lot of it. And this also applies to online methods, like I was saying before. In order to get really good at texting girls, you have to text a lot of girls frequently. That is the best way to get good at texting girls, essentially, is to be in it every single day, because you will notice if you stop for a while, you'll get rusty. And when you come back, it just won't feel right. You'll feel like you're out of the groove. So it's the same whether it's in person or online. You have to stay in it and running a lot of volume in order to get good at it. And to some of you, this may sound obvious, but to a lot of guys, it's just simply not, or they're bullshitting themselves and really lying to themselves about how much effort they're actually putting in. If you really want to be honest with yourself and actually get good at this stuff, keep track, whether it's just in your notes on your phone, or if you want to go, you know, full-blown spreadsheet or whatever, it doesn't matter. Just keep track of the efforts that you're actually putting in, and I guarantee it won't be as much as you think. It's like when you start tracking your macros and you're seeing what you're actually eating in front of you, you're seeing it laid out, you're seeing how many calories you're getting, how much protein, carbs, and fat. It'll usually surprise you in one way or another when you haven't done it before, because you'll either be eating way more than you thought or way less. So just guessing and going by feel usually isn't enough to improve in an area that you actually want to get good at, and dating is no different. So first, just ask yourself, am I honestly putting in enough volume, or am I just bullshitting myself? And again, be really honest with yourself about this, because 9 times out of 10 when I have conversations about this stuff, the guy's just not putting in enough volume. This is a universal issue. Another thing too is that it's almost like a video game. There are certain benefits that you'll unlock, so to speak, only when you get enough volume in. You have to reach the volume threshold in order to unlock that thing though, or else you just won't get the benefit. So an easy one is confidence. Let's say confidence in approaching. You're not gonna get confident approaching until you approach 100 girls, 200, whatever the number may be for you, but you're not gonna actually unlock that confidence unless you put in the required volume. Another one might be something like getting dates from online dating apps. And when you do enough of it frequently, you will understand the process much better, and you'll actually unlock the ability to land dates consistently. But unless you're really genuinely putting in that volume over time, you're not going to unlock that. You're not going to unlock the skill or the feeling of confidence. And remember that confidence is situational in the first place. Confidence comes from doing something over and over again and proving to yourself that you're actually capable of doing it. But the action comes first before the feeling. So again, all roads lead back to volume, no matter if we're talking about skill or a feeling, but it always comes back to volume and getting enough repetition in over and over again so you feel comfortable sitting in the fire, so to speak, and you learn the exact path to get to where you want to go. Another benefit of volume is that you'll get to a point where you just don't give a shit about certain things because you've done it so much. So an easy example of this is approach anxiety. Most guys start off afraid to even say anything to a girl at all. One approach is just like terrifying. But once you do 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, so on and so forth, it becomes far less intimidating. And you don't even think about that anymore. You'll actually forget that you ever had approach anxiety in the first place. Or going back to online methods, once you've had a lot of conversations and you've gotten a lot of dates off dating apps, running through that process becomes habitual in a way. It's like routine to you. You know exactly where the conversation is going to go. You know what she's most likely going to say to this or that, and you know how to direct it toward the date and actually get the date. But all of these are only the result of volume. It's not from watching 50 YouTube videos. That's the wrong type of volume. Watching a ton of videos isn't going to get you anywhere. The best way to use content is to watch videos on a certain subject and then actually go out there and implement it through volume and a ton of repetition. Otherwise, you're just going to be spinning your wheels. And the truth is that most guys are just spinning their wheels because they're content junkies. They're not volume junkies. So you want to start thinking in terms of, how can I get more volume in? How can I be consistent with this? How can I actually do the work that's required in order to see the results that I want, instead of tricking myself into thinking that I'm putting in a lot of work because I'm watching a lot of videos or I'm engaging a lot of discussions in the comments or message boards and all this stuff. That's the exact thing you want to avoid. Anytime you experience a setback or something that kind of gets you down, or you get rejected, or a girl flakes, or you feel like you need to get better at something, your mind should immediately go to, how do I run more volume? How can I crank more volume around this thing? How can I meet more girls? How can I talk to more girls? Because that is the thing that actually moves the needle. A large sample size consistently over time creates a new version of you that is far stronger and more capable than the former version of you. And some guys are gonna hear this and think about volume in a way that's a burden. Like, oh, why do I have to do all that? But you have to think about it in terms of being freeing. Because as you run more volume and you gather more data in a larger sample size, it's actually freeing, because you'll realize a lot of the stuff that you thought mattered didn't actually matter at all. So it's really a win-win in a way. You're gonna develop a lot of skills that are critical for success. You're gonna get used to being in a variety of scenarios with a variety of women. You're gonna learn a lot about yourself and develop much faster than the guy who's just watching a ton of YouTube videos and tricking himself into believing that he's running volume just because he approached 2 girls this month. And through that process, you're gonna realize that there's a lot of girls that just simply won't be into you no matter what technique or what game tactic you use. And then there's gonna be girls who are really down for you and really into you, but you won't discover them unless you run volume. So remember overall that you wanna start thinking in metrics and numbers instead of just feelings and emotions. And you have to actually be honest with yourself and ask yourself, am I really doing enough? Am I really putting honest effort into this? Am I actually being consistent with it? Because if you're like most guys, the answer is probably not. Another thing about volume is, as you increase your volume, you have to pay attention to efficiency so that you don't burn out and so that you're not focusing your efforts on the things that don't actually move the needle. So if you want to fast track this entire process and work with me directly so you can use my systems and my guidance in order to get to your dating goals, then be sure to click the first link in the description and fill out a quick application to work with me directly in my coaching program. And I will see you in the next one.